Hello, everybody. Welcome. Maybe you can hear my dog barking out there. She's welcoming you too. As I let everybody in, first and foremost, let me know in the chat how you're doing today, how things are going for you. And I'm also curious, now that we're entering the tail end of this, we have 2 sessions left, today and next week. What has brought you clarity and what has brought you confusion? Those 2 things are important. And in addition to the clarity and the confusion, where are you currently seeing yourself applying this content, this material? These are questions that I think are important to ask ourselves as we enter the last little bit of our time together, which the last little bit are 3 hours technically, which a lot can happen in 3 hours. Yeah, but to keep in mind, and also to keep in mind the title of your book, the title of your freestyle book, and to make sure that you're constantly using that as an anchor point for answering these questions. Okay, so Maya's doing great. Campbell's doing great. Excited to learn. Marshall doing okay. Back tight from good mornings earlier today. Hopefully that resolves as the day goes on. Maya says clarity, understanding so much more, and confusion, so much more to learn. Yes, confusion is always the space that we create to grow into. And Madalena says she's doing okay. So here we are. Good to see you all. Welcome. Today we enter chapter 6 and 7, which are the muscle up and the burpee. And similar to how we navigated last week, I want us to navigate this week, which is by simply skimming over the chapters and then diving deep where we see fits. And something that I thought we could do today is, as the session goes on, if something comes up where you want me to pause, feel free to stop me. You can just raise your hand in the in your little chat box, and I can see that you are asking a question. And then if everybody's okay with that, we'll stop and dive into whatever's coming up, because as we enter this last little bit, I think it's super important that your participation starts to come to the forefront, as after this, you will be in some way on your own. You'll be flying free. Okay, Campbell says, I have some more clarity around how to see and progress movement. Confusion lies in the transition piece for me. Yes, the transition is everything. And actually, the muscle up is a great place to start addressing transition. So might as well just pull up the book now, and let's get into this. Hopefully everybody can see this okay right now, as for some reason on my end it's showing up a little different than usual, but hopefully we're good. So the muscle up chapter is an interesting one, because the muscle up chapter is probably the main reason a lot of people have bought this book, hoping that by getting the book, they will get access to the quote unquote secrets to unlock the thing that they desire. And this thing that they desire, which is the muscle up, once they have it, especially in the CrossFit or calisthenics world, they will feel like they belong. And they will have their little badge of honor and belonging, as I said. But the truth is that the muscle up, the way it's presented in this book, is as a blueprint for understanding everything that we've talked about. And one of the reasons it's interesting, especially to me, is because the muscle up can be, as any movement, performed in various ways. In this book specifically, I address 4 different moves for the muscle up. One, the strict muscle up on rings and the strict muscle up on bar. And then I address the kipping muscle up on rings and the kipping muscle up on bar. And the confession is that I don't think I've ever been able to do a strict muscle up on a bar. I've never been strong enough to do that. Yet here I am talking about it. And the reason I feel confident talking about it is because it's not about the muscle up itself, but that which it can reveal for us. And the first thing that it reveals in terms of just mindset, mentality of movement is that of coming over, getting over an obstacle. And in the picture, you see me here on the left here coaching somebody on certain technical details, specifically in the dip position, where one has finished this transition, where one has completed this transition. And this is the place where everybody wants to arrive, at the completion of the transition. So one of the things that I want to do as we go through this chapter is to address what Campbell was alluding to, which was finding clarity in that transition. Now, in order to explain the muscle up, we need to break it down into 3 parts. Part number 1 is going to be the pulling phase, which is pulling ourselves from a hanging position to a high pull-up. And then we're going to be talking about the dip phase, which is when you have already completed the pull-up and the transition, and finishing in a support position. And then finally, the transition position. And the transition position being the puzzle piece that allows you to connect both. And when talking about kipping pull-ups, or sorry, about pull-ups, I want to have a little progression that we go through, where kipping pull-ups is the starting ground. It's where we're going to begin thinking about the progression. And the reason is because if you remember in chapters 1, 2, and 3, we talked about the framework of simple, complex, simple. And simple being that which, in terms of mechanics, has very few pieces moving. Complex is that which has a lot of pieces moving, meaning a lot of joints moving at the same time. And then finally, in the progression, having a higher level expression that is simple again. So what I want to do is I want to enter the muscle up from the most complex movement pattern that we can perform when it comes to pulling mechanics, and that is the kipping pull-up. And once we address the kipping pull-up, as I mentioned just a little bit ago, we'll dive into the dip, and we're going to do the same with the dip. We're going to view it from the kipping perspective, the one of assisting ourselves by kicking with our legs. Then finally, we're going to connect those two together. We're going to turn it into the muscle up. The muscle up is that which connects the pull-up to the dip. And then we're going to expand it in ways that allows us to find some clarity. Now, just like in the previous chapter, I lay out, as you can see here, different types of progressions for each movement. And specifically here, I start with the row. And why the row? Well, a row is a very scaled back expression of a pull-up. So if one can't perform a pull-up, performing a row would be a step back in that progression. Now for a row, I want you to remember that a row, the pulling motion, is the mirror image of the push-up. If you remember the mechanics that we addressed in the push-up, if you can address the row from the same perspective, then you will be maximizing that performance. Now, a simple cue to keep in mind is from head to toes, trying to keep a nice straight line. And from the local perspective, meaning at shoulder, elbow, and wrist perspective, or wrist level rather, that the forearm, that this part, from wrist to elbow, remains perpendicular, meaning in a 90-degree angle to the rest of your body. That's what we're looking for. Now, something that is obvious, but is usually not addressed as much as it should, is how we hold on to a bar or onto the rings. In other words, our grip. So before even talking about a scaled version of a pull-up, we need to address the grip. Now, if you read this this chapter and you cover these paragraphs that I have right here, you will see how simple it is. And the simplicity of it is that the grip, as long as it is a full grip, will be a transferable grip. a grip that is applicable. Now, what is a full grip? A full grip is when you get as much as you can of the palm of your hand around the object that you're holding on to, whether it's a bar, a pull-up bar, or a set of rings, or even a wall, the ledge of a wall. And in this little illustration here on the right-hand side, I demonstrate that by also addressing what's known as the hook grip. Now, the hook grip, when holding on to a barbell, maybe you know that it's thumb underneath the index finger and middle finger, so like this, dink, dink, dink. But when holding on to a bar that you're hanging from, the hook grip goes thumb above the index finger and middle finger. It goes like that. And the reason for this is because the hook grip is like a what do you call it? I'm losing the word right now. Basically, it's like a nautical knot that with more tension that you put on it, the tighter it gets. It can't really be undone when doing work. But once you take the tension away, it's very easy to release. And the rule of thumb, pun intended, I guess, is that when our hands are over our head, the thumb will go over the index finger and middle finger. When our hands are below our shoulders or head, the thumb will go underneath the index finger and middle finger. So over, over, under, under. Why do we care about the hook grip? Well, we care about the hook grip not only because it creates more tension under rotation or under work, but also it allows us to grab on to more surface area. Now, there's this debate in CrossFit especially where some people do not enjoy grabbing a bar with their thumb around the bar, and especially not doing the hook grip, which is thumb over the index finger and middle finger. So something to keep in mind here is that going thumb over the bar in this motion, like this, in this shape, is totally legit, as it is creating the same contact surface, but it creates a different type of lock. Now, when do we consider it okay to go thumb over versus thumb under? Well, if you have a bar that is wide enough that it doesn't allow you to get the thumb to touch the index finger and middle finger, then thumb over is totally legit. If you have a bar or a set of rings that allows you to wrap your thumb all the way around, then you should always wrap thumb under the bar. And when I say always, that's of course up to you, but it's recommended that as much as you can, you do this. And this is simply because it gives you more grip. Now, a quick little aside, if you look at gymnastics, the sport of gymnastics, artistic gymnastics, you will see that the men and the women, they perform bar routines. The men perform the high bar and the women perform the uneven bars. They have two bars that are separate, but they do very similar movements, especially on the high bar. The difference is that the men always have their thumbs wrapped around the bar, and the women 99% of the time have their thumbs over the bar. If you pay attention to the width of the bar, the diameter of the bar, the men's bar is smaller, skinnier than the women's bar. Thus, it makes sense that the women would have their thumb over the bar to create more rotation, yet the amount of stability that they need, versus the men who have the opportunity to wrap their thumb around the bar and thus be able to take advantage of it. So these are just things to look at and keep in mind. And the reason is because when we're thinking about developing movement, progressing movement, sometimes it's hard to know what standard is the best standard we should follow. And where does it come from? Where is the evidence? Well, the evidence is everywhere that we look. So start paying attention. Where do you see a hook grip naturally occur? When do you see a hook grip happen under the thumb or index finger? When do you see it happen over the thumb, the index finger, middle finger? When do you see no hook grip occur? And when do you see the opportunity for creating more surface area in contact with whatever we're holding on to? And here in the grip, there is, I was going to say 80%, but I'm just going to say a lot of opportunity to make big changes in people's performance. And in fact, I'm going to show you something about my grip in some of these pictures that will demonstrate where I can improve, or at least I should have improved while taking the pictures for this book. So this is just a little bit on grip. Now, when thinking about grip, I want you to remember the concept of blocking movement. And remember that blocking movement from an anatomical perspective was taking the anatomical body shape and applying it to a movement pattern. In the blocking movement section, I talked specifically about the push-up. And if you remember, the push-up that I was doing then had my hands turned around in this position. My fingers were pointing towards my toes. This same anatomical position can be applied to the pull-up. So if you look at my prone grip versus supine grip that you see on the right-hand side here, you'll see that the supine grip is actually a blocked movement pattern. It's the application of blocking. Now, why is the supine grip or the blocked grip here interesting? Well, if you've ever hung from a bar in a chin-up position, in a supinated grip, you have probably noticed two things. One, that when performing a pull-up, it's maybe slightly easier. Two, what you have probably noticed is that that grip, when hanging especially, and really hanging long, allowing yourself to hang deep, you maybe feel a stretch that goes through your lats, into your shoulders, into your elbows, and into your wrists. And this stretch that you are experiencing being muscular tension. And that muscular tension, if you remember from the principles of progression, is stability. So something to consider when working on a ring row or a row with a bar or even a pull-up is to start performing pull-ups in a chin-up grip, in a supinated grip. And this is not only strict pull-ups, but also kipping pull-ups. When performing kipping pull-ups in this shape, in this supinated grip, in this blocked grip, you'll notice that the range of motion that you can cover globally will be less. It will be a smaller range of motion due to the higher level of tension that you have. Now, this is something that we should lean into, because shorter ranges of motion will make us more precise. Think about balancing on your feet versus on your hands. Your feet are a little bit bigger than your hands. Thus, balancing on your hands requires more control of your center of mass in relationship to your base of support versus standing on your feet. Now, you may be thinking, well, we evolved to stand on our feet. Yes, we do. Thus, our feet are bigger than our hands. But if you look at an ape, the ape's feet and hands are very similar in size. So these are things to keep in mind, because as we are going through the muscle up, you may notice that all we're doing is just revisiting the past. We're revisiting the principles and methods of progression. And we're doing that by simply observing how we naturally can adapt into pulling motions that, in this case, is leading us to a muscle up. Now, when do I start to think about switching my grip? Well, the switch of grip will happen when you need to make it happen. And when is that? Well, that's when you are biomechanically sound. What does this mean? This means that your application of force is effective and efficient. It means also that when you are performing a movement without experiencing pain, you may be experiencing discomfort, but without experiencing pain, you're also ready to move on to the next level. And in addition to that, it's when the context needs you to change the grip. For example, if I am performing a pull-up in a chin-up grip like this, in a supinated grip like this, and then I think about applying this to performing a muscle-up, I'm not going to perform my first muscle-up with my hands like that. I'm probably going to have my hands facing forward. If I think about applying this position to holding on to the handlebars of my bike, I don't ride my bike in this position. I ride my bike like this. I don't type on my keyboard like this. I type like this. The context requires me to change. And when we have this in mind, now we can start to get into the different variations of pulling. So in this case, I start by talking about a ring row. And all I want you to notice here is the approximately 45-degree angle that I'm performing the movement in. And if you remember the push-up that we addressed in the previous chapter, I did the same thing when I was scaling it onto a box. The same angle is matched. It's simply a mirror image. As long as you can see that, then you're golden. Now, the next thing I want you to notice is what I'm trying to work on here is keeping as straight of a line as I can and the forearms as perpendicular as possible to the rest of my body. As long as I have that, then I am moving in the right direction. Now, what's cool about this is that you can continue to progress a ring row into something that is a little bit more difficult by continuing to lean back or bringing your feet higher up. And if you look at this picture right here, if we were to flip it upside down, it would be a push-up. The only difference is that here in this supinated position, this facing up position, I'm in a little bit more of extension than if I were in a hollow body position facing down for my plank. Why is this? Well, because when I am adopting any position in space, I am also working on counteracting gravity. If gravity is pulling me down, I'm going to be pushing up. In this case, pushing up with my hips is putting me into global extension. If I was in a push-up, the hips would be pulled down from by gravity. So I would be pushing away, adopting a hollow body position. As long as you can see this, we are golden. Now, here comes an interesting one, the kipping ring row. I remember when I made a video a long time ago on performing ring rows with a kip, meaning a snap of the hips, how, especially on YouTube, I got a lot of hate for this because this, when watching it, may seem kind of ridiculous because it seems counterintuitive to the original purpose for performing a row, which is developing upper body strength. But the kipping ring row, what it's doing, it's allowing us to enter a pulling motion through a more complex movement pattern. Complex movement pattern meaning I'm not only pulling with my arms, but I'm also utilizing the rest of my body to assist it. When I have a more complex movement pattern, I have more options. And actually, if I may, Marilena sent me a message about the Move Strong program just, I think today or yesterday. And I thought I would bring it up here because a ring row or a push-up may be hard to perform even when scaling it into this shape, the 45-degree angle for the row or the 45-degree angle onto a box with for the push-up. But when performing it with a bow, with a breaking of the global position of the midline, gives us more access to the movement. We can perform kipping push-ups as well as we can perform kipping ring rows. If we can perform a kipping ring row with, what would we call it? Integrity, with integrity of the midline, meaning that things are connected, are uniform, are moving fluidly from one shape to another, and with control, it will give us access to the ranges of motion and the movement patterns that we're trying to develop locally. Now, yes, this makes things a little bit more difficult, but the difficulty of it is worth spending time on because it gives us more access. And here, as you can see, I am showcasing a kipping ring row, where I would start with my body completely glued to the ground. And what shape is this? Well, this shape right here is the hollow body position. So we're going back to the very beginning of talking about motor control or movement control. In addition to this, what you'll see is that when we get into the kipping muscle up, this is the front swing of the muscle up. This is when you're swinging on the rings. This is the front portion of the swing. And I want you to notice where my feet are in relationship to my face, as this will be something that will be addressed as we get into the kipping muscle up. And the other thing I want you to notice is the finish. This finish is like a regular ring row, but just a little bit more exaggerated in its bow. But look at the forearm. It remains, if you made a line from my ear to my ankle, this straight line versus the forearms line is creating a 90-degree angle. As long as these angles are present in our mind, then we are hitting the positions that will facilitate the transition later on. Oh, something that I forgot to mention. Here, I address in this little paragraph right here that you can see, is that the negative portion, the eccentric portion of our work, is where we can develop the strength. So for the concentric phase, the phase of contracting the muscles, you can use a kip. And then for the eccentric phase, the negative, you can keep it strict, meaning you can keep it nice and tight. This will start to develop not only muscular strength, but the neuromuscular stability that you need to be able to translate it into whatever it is that you want. So that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, so this same rule applies to our pull-up. Something that we can do with a pull-up is, yes, we can perform a chin-up pull-up or supinated pull-up, a prone pull-up or a regular pull-up. We can perform a strict pull-up versus a kipping pull-up. In a kipping pull-up, we can not only perform just a regular kip where we go from extension to flexion globally, but we can also add the legs. We can make it as complex as we want. As long as we know why we are performing the style of pull-up that we are choosing to perform, then and only then will we be able to create the translation. And what is the translation? This is the transferability of the skill. And how do we define that which is going to allow us to transfer the skill? Well, this is in first identifying what I need. What do I need right now? Do I need to develop the strength to perform a pull-up? Do I need to develop the awareness of how a pull-up is to be done in order to translate it into a muscle-up? Am I doing pull-ups to serve me as accessory work that will make me better at performing a handstand or a handstand push-up? When knowing this, then and only then will we be able to develop the right approach, the right focus. And I want to show you something right here. Do you see this line? This line right here is relatively straight from head to toes. But now look at the forearm. The forearm is no longer perpendicular to the body. Does this make my pull-up legit? Yes, totally. Because in this case, the standard that I'm trying to meet is simply chin over the bar. But here's the problem. If I were to take this standard of chin over the bar as a pull-up that is going to transfer into a muscle-up, from here, getting my shoulders from under the bar to over the bar will be practically impossible. Thus, this pull-up standard is limited to the pull-up itself, meaning from there, I could not go any further. That's where it would end. But we can see it from a completely different perspective. Imagine this shape right here. Now, instead of having my hands out here, having them a little bit closer, what would that look like if I was working on pushing mechanics? Well, maybe it looks like pressing a barbell. The barbell is in my hands, right on top of my elbows, and from there, I'm pressing straight up. What else could this look like? Well, if I were to put this image upside down, this position would be the bottom of my handstand push-up. Specifically, the bottom of my handstand push-up on a set of parallettes that allowed me to go to full depth. And if you think about the transition position of a handstand push-up, especially freestanding, which is a headstand, the headstand is not straight up and down. It has a slight angle. If you can see how these body shapes and these angles are transferable to everything else, then you will be able to see the completeness of each progression. So moving forward, we can, of course, scale a pull-up by using a band. We can have somebody holding us. We can add a kip like we talked about during the ring row or bar row. And as long as our finish positions are similar to the ones that we had in a strict fashion for kipping, then everything is legit. That being said, if we want to translate this into a muscle up, we're going to need to cover a greater range of motion. Thus, it's important here to realize that a pull-up doesn't end with our chin over the bar. It can be taken a little further. And where can we take it? Well, we can take it to these 3 levels that we have right here. First, chin over the bar. Second, chest to bar. Third, hips to bar. Now, what happens when we do this? Well, check this out. When we have a chest to bar, look at the evolution. Notice the difference in the forearm versus the chin over the bar forearm. The chin over the bar forearm was more vertical, meaning it was hanging down. But now for chest to bar, look where it is. It's perpendicular to the global shape. Does everybody see that? Just give me a little thumbs up so I know that you see this. This chin over the bar shape right here also mimics the bottom of a push-up position. Now, look at the hip to bar. Look where my forearm is now, pointing all the way back. Look how far away I am from the bar. Now, this shape right here is almost like performing a straight arm row. It's like performing a front lever. Why do we care about creating more space away from the bar as we are exaggerating the pull-up? Well, for one, we are becoming closer to that which we started with, which was a row. And two, look at the space that now I have created to rotate the shoulder over the bar. There's nothing getting in my way here. I have just cleared the runway. Versus, if we go back here, look at this. The first thing I would run into would be the bar. Performing a transition in the muscle up there would be very, very difficult. So what are we looking for here? In order to progress a pull-up that is going to deliver a muscle up, we can follow this 3-step progression. Chin over the bar first, that's progression number 1. Chest to bar second, can you do that? Great. Can you do hips to bar? Fantastic. Now you have the room, you're ready to go. These are 3 ways of performing pull-ups and 3 different standards that we can utilize, not only for getting closer to a muscle up, but also for developing a movement pattern that will carry over into other things. And we're going to address this next week when we get into the accessory work. This is so simple, it's almost ridiculous, but just keeping it in mind will help. Now, check this out. This little map, we could call it, of the body positions or the points of performance. As long as you can see these, then you will be seeing that which you need and that which you are developing. I'm going to leave it at that for now, just so we don't confuse it anymore. And I would recommend that you use that as a starting point. Now, let's get into the dip. What is the dip really? Well, the dip is an exaggerated push-up. It is a push-up where instead of going to partial extension of the shoulder. I don't know if you can see it here, but this is extension is when our arms go behind. It's an exaggerated extension of the shoulder and performed where our body, instead of being horizontal, is vertical. As long as we know that, then we're golden. Now, what I want you to see here is, look at this angle. You see this angle right here? This angle is actually the same angle that I create when I'm performing a chin over the bar pull-up. It's the same angle that I'm creating when I'm performing a headstand that's going to apply to a handstand push-up. These angles always remain present if we're able to see them. If you can perform a dip and allow yourself to lean back, well, in this case would be lean forward, but allow your feet to lean back, to reach back, sorry, then what you'll notice is that that lean is going to create a little swing. That little swing is key because it's part of making yourself available in the swinging mechanics with gravity that will one day, if you choose to, will translate into a muscle up. And we can talk a little bit about that later, but all it is, it's shifting, connecting, and flowing. Remember the flow. The more range of motion, the more coverage, the more access you get. Now, a kipping dip, let's see if I show it here. Oh, yeah. So a kipping dip can't be performed by extending and flexing the body. The kipping dip, unfortunately, is limited mostly to a kick of the legs. And the kick of the legs is simply when you're in the bottom position, pulling the knees up, and then with that pull, noticing that it elevates your center of mass. And as your center of mass is elevated, having a window of weightlessness, where you can simply lock out the elbows. In other words, performing a kipping dip is kind of like performing a push jerk. A push jerk where the barbell is in your hands and on your shoulders, you're dipping, you're driving, creating space, creating weightlessness, and now choosing to get under it. Getting under the bar, meaning catching it where it is the same thing that you would do during a kipping dip. This is something that is hard to explain in words. You would have to experience it. But as long as you can see that pulling the legs up is the jump and the lockout of the elbows is catching yourself where your center of mass ends, which ideally would be around ring level, that becomes your kipping dip, which uses very similar mechanics or similar principles rather as a push jerk. But now, if we go back to the subtlety of the lean that I was talking about, the more my heels go back, the more I lean forward, the more my legs swing backwards, what is happening? Well, I am swinging back and then up into the support. That swing, although it's not a global extension and flexion, becomes a little bit of a pendulum that can also be considered a kip. So I want you to notice when you perform a dip or when you watch somebody perform a dip, are they taking advantage of that swing? Do you even want them to take advantage of that swing? And in addition to that, can they add a leg kick? And is that leg kick allowing them to create maybe more repetitions, a more optimal standard for this specific purpose that you're currently working in? These are things to simply think about and keep in mind. Now, once again, here are some points of performance to keep in mind, but I want you to look at this one on the right-hand side. What shape is this? This is the anatomical body position. I wonder what I'm looking at here. I'm looking at the sky. I'm wondering, what am I doing here? Taking 3,000 pictures for this. Who's going to see this? Well, here we are. It's a funny little picture. But anyways, this is the anatomical body shape, okay? This anatomical body shape is not only the shape that we start movements in, but it's also the shape that we finish movements in. And in this case, we're finishing the dip in this position. Now, I think I talked about this. I can't remember if it was chapter 2. I think it was chapter 2. In chapter 2, I want you to remember the standards for performance. Where do they come from? Well, one, they come from an anatomical shape, a biomechanical advantage. They come from an aesthetic place. Think about this position right here. If my thumbs were turned in, I was like this, my shoulders rolled in, being completely hunched over like this, what do you think would look more powerful, stronger? This or this? What looks more confident? Well, I think the answer is obvious. And the beauty is that the aesthetic of an open chest, flat back, ready and available versus a closed chest and sad one also matches our biomechanics. It's also more effective. In addition to that, I want you to notice how the straps here are not touching my shoulders. They're not touching my arms. In gymnastics, you want to avoid touching the straps at all times, because the moment you touch the strap, that which holds the rings, there is a point deduction. And with a point deduction, guess what happens? You lose. And when a gymnast loses, they become very sad. But the beauty is that when you lose once, you start to realize that that loss will allow you to find the next best expression. And the next best expression is something that I wish I could pull back to the previous chapter without getting lost here. But I don't know if you remember, we skimmed over it really quickly. When performing a handstand on the rings, for the initial progression of getting into the handstands, what I am asking you to do, and in fact, I would recommend that you go back and read this. I am asking you to turn your hands in and place the straps on your arms in order for you to roll up the straps. This rolling up of the straps is although in gymnastics, artistic gymnastics would be considered a fault, for a progression, it would be a success. So I want to see if I can actually find it here because I think it's important to notice. And before we actually dive into the muscle up. Okay, give me 2 seconds. I'm going to find it right now. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I'm always keen to hear what is going through your mind. And I know that I am moving very fast with this, but that's why you're reading the book. All I'm trying to do is to highlight the most important points. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Okay, so let's see if I can pull up this picture. Look at this picture of me doing a handstand push-up right here. Can everybody see that? My arms are on the straps. Now, let's see if you can see how I get into the handstand push-up and how I use the straps, which are points of contact, to assist me in rolling up, which in gymnastics would be considered a fall. Okay, so first check this out. Here is the ideal. Let's see if we can get it. Yeah, here's the ideal position where my hands are turned out and my arms, or at least the upper arm, is not touching the strap. That would be the ideal. But the truth is that when we're progressing into that, in fact, there are Olympic level gymnasts who are unable to perform a press to handstand like that. So what we can do is we can do this. We can turn our hands in and we can lean on the straps. And that is totally legit. And it's totally legit because we allow it to be a legit way of doing it. And when should we allow something to be legit? Well, when it gives us access to that which we want or need in a way that is safe and progressive. And doing it with the awareness that there are more challenging ways, that there are ways that are not only more challenging, but potentially more inclusive. And what is something that is more inclusive when it comes to movement? It is something that is more transferable. Now, check this out. As we move on into the muscle up, I want you to notice what I'm talking about here. And I'm talking about the false grip. And the false grip is, let's see, why is this not showing up? Interesting. Anyways, here it skips. So check this out. The false grip is this. Everybody, I think, here knows what the false grip is. And the false grip is when you grab a set of rings, it's getting the wrist on top of the ring. It's allowing the crook of the wrist to rest on the ring. This false grip makes your arm shorter, gives you more surface area. Remember, the full grip is getting full grip on the bar. In this case, with the ring, you're not only getting the palm of your hand, but you're also getting the wrist. By doing this, giving yourself access to not only more grip, but also getting into a position that is going to allow you to transition straight into the dip, which, if you noticed before, in these pull-up pictures, watch where I am right here. Look at this wrist. Do you guys see that? That wrist is not conducive for performing a muscle up. That wrist should be approximately here. It shouldn't be in this shape. It should be in this shape. Why is this? Well, because our movement should go from if I'm performing a transition in the muscle up, should go from my fingertips into my knuckles, into my wrists, into my elbows, into my shoulders, and then the rest of the body. These are just little nuances. So now, what is the false grip? The false grip is an option that we have on the rings to, one, create more surface area, and two, get our wrists already over the rings so we don't have to worry about it. And when we get our wrists already over the rings, now we have more room for the elbow and the shoulder to transition. That's all I want you to know. Keep in mind that a false grip in gymnastics is a deduction. You're not allowed to use a false grip in gymnastics. That is, in the sport of gymnastics, a no-no. But somehow we have carried it into our practices of fitness because it gives us access. The problem is that access at times feels so good that all of a sudden we get trapped in it. We get stuck in it. So why am I sharing this? Well, I'm sharing this because if you are teaching somebody how to do a muscle up and you're teaching them the false grip, great. That is going to give them a lot of power to be able to develop the ability to feel what it's like to do a muscle up. That being said, if you're eventually going to transition into something like a kipping muscle up, you will notice that the false grip doesn't carry over. In fact, it blocks you. It limits you from being able to swing. Your swing in a false grip is not as fluid as your swing with a regular grip. So what this means is that the false grip is simply a stage or a step in a progression. In addition to that, you may be thinking, well, if I do a strict muscle up, I should have a false grip and not a neutral grip or a regular grip. You are half correct. Yes, you should be able to perform, you will be able to perform a muscle up with a false grip with more ease than with no false grip, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to perform strict variations of a muscle up with no false grip. So this is just something to keep in mind as you think about this as a progression. Now, the next thing I want you to notice is that regardless of having a false grip or no false grip, when performing a muscle up from now on for everybody here is no longer the highest pull up into the deepest dip. It's going to be the highest ring row or bar row into the deepest ring push up or bar push up. What does this mean? It simply means that we're going to mimic the rowing shape, the most basic rowing shape. Remember how I was scaling the row into a 35, 45 degree angle? That's what we're going to do to perform a muscle up. And with that, I want you to notice that we're creating space to rotate over the rings. Space that's going to allow this circle that I'm creating in the shoulders to get over the rings and not get through or under the rings. This is key. And if you're thinking about pull-up, remember that when you're thinking pull-up, you're thinking vertical. That's going to make that your shoulders can't transition through. But if you're thinking ring row, now you're creating space to get over it. This is all I really want you to know about the muscle up. And if you know this, then you know it all. And then what is adding a kip? Well, a kip is simply adding a swing. It's adding the snap of the hips. It's adding the knees and legs. So what I want you to do is, when we're done with this, I want you to go through this progression, which is the toe, hip, knees, sit-up progression. And it's done on a low set of rings and with a band. When you have done this transition on the low rings, which I'm going to attach a video to, you will start to notice that a muscle up, the transition specifically, is simply performing a sit-up. It's simply performing a candlestick roll. It's simply doing all that which we have done or talked about in the previous chapters. And the magic of the muscle up is being a master of the foundation. Look at the shapes: hollow body shape, arch shape, neutral shape, hips up, which is the kipping ring row, knee bend, heel drive, which is part of performing a candlestick roll, the rotation forward, keeping room for the shoulders to transition through, and then simply finishing into the dip. It's all the same movement. And when we realize that it's all the same movement, things become very, very simple. And the progressions, the mechanics, the body shapes remain the same. Look at this little tuck position, neck neutral, meaning that the global shape, the projection of my spine, is neutral. Then I have the flexion that has occurred in the spine, which is my hollow body shape. Then I have this little squat position. And then I have all that happening by rotating over the rings and that being the transition. But all that is completely irrelevant unless we understand where we came from, which was developing the most fundamental movements in pushing and pulling with the upper body and pushing and pulling with the lower body. And that's the muscle up. It's getting over that obstacle. Now, this leads us into the next chapter, which is the burpee. And what is the burpee? Well, the burpee is what I joke as being that which tells us the meaning of life. And I'm not even going to go through this burpee chapter. I'm just going to tell you a little story. And it's the story I tell at the end of my seminars. And the way I tell the story is by playing the imagine game. And I ask for somebody to come out and I say, okay, do me a favor and just lie down on the ground as if you had just fallen, as you had tripped and fallen. And you're going to just imagine that you're lying there. And then from there, all I want you to do is to get up. And most people just easily take a little step. They do a little push up. Then they get into some sort of lunge and they get back up. And then I say, okay, now imagine that you fell backwards, that you tripped and you just fell onto your butt or you're lying on your back. Now do me a favor and get up. And when they get up, they do something that looks like a Turkish get-up. I think most of you know what a Turkish get-up is, but if you don't know what it is, some of a Turkish get-up looks a little bit like this, where from a seated position, you basically lift your hips and then you swing your leg through and you end up in this lunge position, which takes you into a very basic lunging pattern. And then I say, okay, now do me a favor. Imagine you fell down and you broke an arm. Now go ahead and get up. And all of a sudden they get up, but now they're using a pattern that looks slightly different than their original one. They no longer use that arm that is broken. They're using the arm that they have access to. In other words, they're using that which they are confident is available to them. This is utilizing your strength to move your weakness, to move that which is supposedly broken. And then I say, okay, well, now imagine you fell and you broke both arms. Now go ahead and get up. All of a sudden, they start to try to get up and they realize that there may be limitations in the ranges of motion of their hips and their ankles, and they don't have access to going from a seated position or a lying down position to a lunge position. And this is when they start to rock, they start to swing, they start to perform a candlestick roll. And that leads them to a pattern that we have taught, just like the candlestick roll that I was addressing. And then I say, okay, well, now finally do me a favor and lie down again. Imagine you fell, you broke two arms and one leg. Now go ahead and get up. All of a sudden, they're performing rolling candlestick rolls. Sorry, they're performing candlestick rolls to get up. And this is just a story about not only the act of getting on and off the ground, but realizing that that which is limiting you is that which is producing the standards that we consider to be the highest levels of performance when it comes to basic movement mechanics. And within the getting down and getting up, within the burpee, exists all the squatting mechanics that you need, all the push-up mechanics that you need, all the pulling mechanics that you need, all the unilateral loading mechanics that you need to develop, and all the kipping, swinging, rolling motions that you need. And when you can explore the ground and the air in these different fashions by not only taking away but adding opportunities, you start to see a spectrum of movement, and that spectrum of movement containing all of the principles for progression, all the methods for progression that we have addressed in part 1. And not only that, you start to see the transferability of those movement patterns into the handstand push-up, the muscle up, and whatever else you want. And in addition to that, you start to develop a greater level of body awareness, we can call it, that is transferable. And this is simply a way of sharing with you that no matter what your style is, your method is, the technique is, as long as you can choose one and explore that one in as many different ways that you can possibly imagine and beyond, you will always arrive at the same conclusions that if you had chosen a different movement pattern. So this is a way of acknowledging that freestyle is the ability to see it all, but having the courage to choose one thing, one focus, and realizing that in that one focus, the solutions to all the problems, to all that which you're developing exist. And that's where the magic happens. And when the time comes, when it's a good chance for you to test the waters elsewhere, move away from where you are right now, you will realize when you come to the next place, you will simply be starting the same exploration from a completely new vantage point. And that's when the puzzle pieces come together and everything starts to transform into something very special. Now, in this chapter, I want you to simply notice that all the progressions for the burpee happen with the same techniques. Same thing as the push-up on a box. We're doing burpees on a box. We're using a kipping motion to perform the burpee. We are using the old man squat to perform the burpee. We are using let's see. Oh yeah, we're using the rotational pieces that we use in the muscle up, but now in reverse to create the transitions. We use the different stances that we talked about in squatting. We use unilateral loading. So the pistol shape, performing a burpee with one leg. We do it with the upper body being that which translates into our basic locomotion, like walking and running, swinging your arms. We do that from, here are the points of performance again. And we do that from our back and from our chest. And this is the magic of freestyle. And it's that everything is everything. And when you see that, then there are no secrets. And that's very powerful. Okay, my friends, let's get into some Q&A if there's anything that you'd like to share or ask. I'll take silence as it is very clear, or I'm so confused and overwhelmed right now that I have nothing to say.
I have, I guess, more of a comment with a lot of this stuff, especially the stuff that or maybe not even especially, but I think we see it show up more in the higher level stuff like the handstand or the muscle up. There's like such this aspect of movement control. Speaking for myself as an athlete, I can get in some of these positions, but they're not perfect. And then the people I coach can get in some of them, but it's like really shaky. And then that thing happens where people get their muscle up and they feel like they belong in the club, but they're just like, they continually like layer upon movement patterns that like aren't the best. And I know that's a very long conversation, but like do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, and I love this conversation. So, I mean, we can take it in many different directions. But let's start here. Let's start around the concept of mastery. Mastery being the constant return to the path of polishing. As coaches, a lot of times we see our job is to see that what others are able to, but currently are not willing or they are unavailable to. And this is where developing an environment, a culture, a narrative that is conducive for developing enough curiosity to look at what polishing can bring us, polishing of a movement pattern of a pursuit can give us, will be that which elicits the best outcomes. So let's set an example. When was the last time, Campbell, you were working with somebody or in a group and you notice, there's so much wasted potential here. I am starting to get frustrated, and I have maybe tried to communicate the potential that exists, but it's just not landing. Is there a specific moment or something that you can recall that maybe we can work from?
Yeah, for sure.
Feel free to share.
Yeah, for sure. There was like a quality piece. I think it's like last Thursday or something, where we were doing muscle ups in a class of people that like, let's say 50% of the room had a muscle up. And of those 50% that had it, the buy-in to like work transition drills and tighten things up was essentially zero, right? Like I have a muscle up, it's like the EMOM is like 3 muscle ups on the minute. I can do that, no problem. Like I don't see what the issue is. I don't see why we have to work on the low rings first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you think? What do you think their reason for not wanting to work on the lower rings was?
I would say that generally it was because they believed that it was beneath them, and that maybe there was like they had trouble seeing that potential you were talking about. They had trouble seeing like what's beyond the muscle up, or like what's beyond the ability to string together as many that will probably show up in a workout.
Mm-hmm. In other ways, in their eyes, that which you were presenting as valuable was seen as a regression.
Correct. Yeah.
And this is where you know that regression is progression, but for them, regression is a loss of something. It's a loss of status. It's a loss of, am I going to feel like I want to feel at the end of this practice or training session? Am I going to be able to compare myself to others and be like, yeah, see, I belong to this group? Is it a question of belonging? Or is it all of the above? And most likely it is all of the above. And this is where establishing an environment that maybe before or after allows for people to see that which they truly need, and then giving it to them in a way where they are open to feeling different, meaning less challenged physically and more challenged mentally, to helping them understand that that is leading them where they truly want to go. And if they are not willing to go there, for us as coaches to say, well, fuck it. That's not my problem. That's your problem. And that becoming a practice of self-awareness. Now, the moment you say, fuck it, I don't care, the question here is, what is it that you truly don't care about it? Is it about their performance, or is it about them not being ready or available yet to adhere to that which you know is of true value? Whatever it may be, that's where you currently are in your own development, and that's where they currently are in their development in relationship to that which you are providing or creating as an environment. In other words, it's simply acknowledging that it is what it is. This doesn't take away from the fact that tomorrow when you show up, that you're going to try something slightly different, that you're going to continue to nurture in the best way that you can. And something that I have found very helpful is creating analogies. And this is the power of storytelling, where if somebody just set a personal best or personal record on a snatch, for example, and just snatched 100 kilos, 225 or 222, whatever it may be. If the next day they came in and you asked them to open with 225 or 222 or 100 kilos in the snatch, they would say you're totally crazy, because that's their max. That's their best. They would say, I have to warm up first. I have to start with the PVC pipe, then with the bar, and then slowly add weight until I can build up not only my physiology, my body, but also my confidence. The same way they experience getting under a bar that has this very specific metric, we need to learn how to translate in the language of movement. And that can only happen by addressing that which they need and by showcasing it in a way that maybe is aesthetically appealing, that is more elegant in a way, more beautiful, creative in a way, more fluid, something that when they see it and do it, feels like they're doing the real thing, that they're performing the highest level. And that is the artistry of coaching. And every single person is going to be different.
That's helpful. Can I tack on another question to that?
Please.
So like maybe with the muscle up, it's easier, or at least in theory, easier to get people to see like that aesthetic piece. But on something like, and as you were talking, I was thinking that, man, this shows up all the time, like a hollow rock in class, where we have to like say, hey, like today we're doing a tuck rock, or today we're doing a half tuck, because there's room for everybody to improve. Whereas if it's just like hollow rocks is the prescription. Even in the warm up, we're going to see a lot of broken positions. We're going to see a lot of people who think that they're doing it right, but really they're not. How do you like shift the culture so that people are able to see that, or able to feel that? And I know it's a long-term thing.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great question. So for example, for the hollow rock, instead of approaching it from a technical perspective and saying, okay, now when we perform the hollow rock in this fashion, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. I want you to pull your knees here, your hips there, your shoulders here, whatever it may be. Instead of approaching it that way, simply saying, I want you to try to explore what is the most fluid movement pattern that you can possibly produce right now. That's it. How fluid can you be? How smooth can it feel on your body? How little can you do in terms of effort and still perform the movement? What would it look like if it was effortless? Explore that. And when we give them access to this power of feeling the body from a fluid perspective, from a movement perspective, all of a sudden, all the technicalities come into play. Furthermore, what ends up happening is that they start to work on that which needs work, which sometimes is, oh yeah, I need a little bit of a higher contraction around the spine, or I need a little bit more of curvature in the spine, or you know what, I need to squeeze my butt, or I feel like as I'm rolling backwards, I am kind of clunky, thus I need to pull my legs with me. Or I'm noticing that I'm getting a little lazy in my head position, or I'm looking at the sky when I should be looking at the wall. They start to notice that which they need to focus on. And the body does it for them. And as you notice the corrections that they are making unconsciously at first, bringing them to the forefront of the conversation and saying, notice what happens when you move fluidly. You move by doing X, Y, Z. Next time you come in and we ask you to do a hollow rock, I want you to do X, Y, Z as your points of performance, while at the same time feeling fluid and exploring these new realms of movement.
That was really helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for the question, Campbell. I think these comments are helpful to add some color. What else is coming up? It can be anything. It doesn't have to be about this week. It can be about last week. It can be about something that's coming up, something that you are curious about, something that you're feeling challenged with right now in your coaching or in your practice. Yeah, what are you experiencing? Sarah.
I would like to share something that I, now that you explain it, and I mean, it's clear that everything builds up on the basics. But for me, it's interesting that being an adult person, whatever that means, I get I get very frustrated by thinking, okay, now by my age and by everything that I've done so far, I should be able to perform this by now. If it's something that I've done for my whole life, or if it's something new, why am I not able to learn this quicker or to be able enough to do that? And then it's been beautiful to watch today's session, to appreciate what I already know, like the abdominals exercise, the going down to the floor, like things that I forget to appreciate that I'm able to do that. And then I become addicted to be someone special for myself, not even for someone else. Mm-hmm. And then I start to feel disconnected, and this gap becomes bigger. And while I train, it's like when you eat a fruit that is old. This is how I feel internally and judgmentally. And this is a voice, oh no, this is a feeling. It's not even a voice that is all the time now for years coming with me, and for no fucking reason. Mm-hmm. So when I see that happening in my students, I can take them and put them into another boat. But now listening to you, it's like, you better start enjoying everything you move, even if it's this, and mm-hmm. appreciate that your elbow is doing to do the row. It's a row for my, so this was nice to appreciate everything I do, not just in the studio and not in comparison to my past self nor anyone else.
Mm, beautiful. I love that reflection, as it's interesting because we tend to identify with our current level of progression. Oh shit, I'm killing it. I am the best. Oh shit, I'm sucking right now. I am the worst. When in reality, that's the constant. It's the change. And it's in the change where all the cues, the choices are being revealed for you to move in the direction not only of your needs, but in becoming even less identified with your current state of performance and more identified with the process. And that being so cliche, it almost is hard to say, but that being it. Because in that state of, oh yeah, I'm just coming in and doing the thing, being enough to satisfy the side of you that needs satisfying, and leaning into that which is dissatisfying, not in a way that feels disempowering, but rather empowering to continue to move. And on top of that, what is exciting to me, if you will, is that it is here where the methods are created and where constraints can be implemented in order to push us just a little further. And this is competition. This is saying on December 12th, I am performing on stage. I'm going to be challenging that which I have been polishing. And it's on that competition floor, it's on that stage, it's the moment that you have chosen to perform, to present, where all of your decisions come to the forefront and allow you to see where you acknowledged and where you dismissed. And thus, now going forward, being able to say, okay, maybe scaling my muscle ups to the low rings with a band is a good call. Coach Campbell, can you please help me? So it's very powerful. And I love the reflection. And I think it's where we need to identify in order to break our identity, break free from our identities, and then transcend. And this is kind of meta and esoteric, but it is part of the value that exists in freestyling. It's kind of like in hip hop. I was watching an old 60 Minutes interview the other day with Eminem, and he had a big box of just lyrics. And these were just one-liners, a word, how to pronounce a word, that when the time comes and he goes into the studio or into the booth and he's listening to some music, he's like, I have that somewhere. It's there. Let me pull it out and can read it and now plug it in to that which, in his case, he was creating. And that's the same thing with movement, is when can I pull from that which I have practiced to plug it in right here? And sometimes it's going to be expressed in very simple, mundane ways. But it's when we can acknowledge, like you were saying, Sarah, like, oh, just grabbing a cup of water, my coffee, my tea is performing a curl, or bringing it to my body is performing a row. Maybe when I do that, if I just brought my hands down a little bit lower, I'm performing a row in a way that's going to translate into my muscle up. And then all of a sudden you're practicing muscle ups all the time. And when the time comes to perform the muscle up, it's kind of like, it's there. It's second nature. You didn't have to tell me. And the fact that you told me was simply a reminder. And isn't that the truth of the human experience, is that everything that is true that we learn, although it may be something that has us in awe or feel mind-bending, it is so obvious when we learn the truth that we realize that we knew it all the time. It was just kind of hidden. And that right there is the true meaning of education, which in Latin, educare is to extract. It's the extraction of knowledge. It's the extraction of wisdom. And that's what practice really is. And that's what we're really doing here. The muscle up, the burpee, the push up, the squat, all that is just an excuse, a mechanism for accessing the understanding. Cool. Okay. Well, that was session 5. If anybody has anything else that they would like to share, please share. Other than that, next week, what we're going to get into is into the application of some of that which we have talked about, accessory work / programming, whatever that means. And then my favorite topic, which is lifestyle, which is the unique expression of each individual in whatever context that is in front of us. Let's see. Maya. Thank you, Maya. Yeah, it has been a good session today. And I'm grateful for all of you for showing up. And I look forward to next week, our last session together, and then seeing where this evolves. Yeah, looking at your faces here. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you all. And I'll see you next time. Much love, everybody. Take care. Bye.